press, so extract it. We will go in, choose English, and there will be a setup.exe. That is the file that you want to run. We will tell it yes, and it should start up the installation wizard. Okay, you do have to accept it and tell it okay. The two things that you could do here: one, express install. Express install will install one driver for one machine. The custom install, if you're doing an install where multiple machines are installed, you could actually install the drivers for all of them all at one time. I only have a little 1820, so that is all that I am going to do, the express. We will go ahead and tell it to install, and we do not want to participate in anything. Okay, and the driver is done. Also on the newer machines, or pretty much anything that has duplexing, my little 1820 does not, you will have a checkbox for duplex. By default it is checked. You will want to uncheck that. And then for this one, I will typically, okay, there we go, hit the little drop down and tell it to do the basic tab as the default. And typically I will wait on the test page until everything is done. So that should finish the install. You can go ahead and close out of this. Open up your printers folder, which is going to vary depending on operating system. Windows 10, you can just type in printer and it'll come up with this printers and scanners. And again, this is a little bit different than like with Windows 7. So what you do is come down to the printer, click on it, just a left click, and then tell it that you want to manage. And this is where you will find the printer properties, printing preferences. So some of the changes that I personally make is in the printer properties. If you go over to the device settings, you do have these down. Well, first of all, you want to verify that it is set correct on the options. It should be set correct. You will also have this PDL. By default, these use the PCL XL. Especially for customers that do a lot of PDFs. PDFs are PostScript, and so you're more likely to run into issues using the PCL XL driver. Well, what Kyocera did, because Adobe charges insane amounts of money for PostScript licensing, is Kyocera came up with their own PostScript language, which is KPDL. So I do change it to KPDL. One of the other things to keep in mind if you do go out on a network call where the customer says that it's just not printing right, there's things where maybe there should be little bullet points and instead there's check boxes, just kind of really weird things where it just doesn't look right. What happens with a lot of programs such as Adobe InDesign and some of these graphic programs is it's pulling information in from different places, fonts and graphics and everything, and so it doesn't always print out correctly. Well, on the Macs you have an option for print as image, and basically what it does is it looks what's on your screen and says, well, I'm just going to print whatever I see here, and it ignores everything that's linked to the document and just prints it the way it sees it on the screen. Well, that's what this GDI compatibility mode would be similar to. So I will typically leave this unchecked unless a customer is having kind of weird issues. Tell it OK, and at this point you could come back to General and print a test page, and as you may be able to hear, it is printing. So we will get out of that, go into the printer properties, or I'm sorry, preferences. Now if you're doing a color machine, by default they are set to print in color. I would change the unless the customer wants it left to print color, I would change it to black and white. Going in through the printers folder like this, it changes the default. If you're inside a program like Word or something like that and you go into the printing preferences, it'll change it only for that particular job. So to change any defaults, you need to change them from the printing preferences inside the printers folder. One of the other things that I would suggest is, by default, the media type is set to auto media type. I would go ahead and also change this to plain. Reason being, if you some of them will also say unspecified, and again you want to change it to plain, because what that will do is, let's say they have letterhead in one letter cassette and just plain paper in the other. If you send the document as unspecified for the media type, if it runs out of plain, it doesn't care what the media type is. It'll go to the next letter cassette and start using their letterhead. So if you specify plain, as long as in whatever software they're using to print from, they also have it set to plain or letterhead or whatever, the machine will not only auto select the tray or auto switch based on paper size, but it'll also do it based on the media type. So you do not want to leave that on unspecified, or here just auto media selection. And I do believe, just for the basic print driver install, that's about it. I'll go over one other thing, I guess. So if we come back in here to the printer properties, if the customer is using job accounting, and they do want it for printing as well, because you can have it to where if they send a print job with an invalid code, you can have it to where it'll go ahead and print, or it will just delete the job. So if they want the job accounting for printing as well, if you come back in here under Administrator, Job Accounting, put a check mark in here, and then you have the option of either specifying an ID code, tell it to prompt for a code, or you can have a list of codes in here that they could choose from. And if you wanted to do that, you could, well, let's see here. Oh, you have to add a code in order for it to. And I will just do something real quick here, and add. Well, you know what? Because I don't have the account codes turned on the 1820, it's not going to cooperate. So we will just leave that alone. Anyway, if you added the codes in there, then you do have the other options down there. Let me go back in there real quick. You do have the other options down here if you add some codes in to either prompt for an ID and validate, display an account list. So if you tell it to display an account list, whatever you have in here, it'll just pop that up when they go to print, and then they can select whichever one they want. But usually they will use one of these two, to where it either prompts for an ID code, or if they only use one ID code, you can just specify an ID code. And that is it for a basic print driver install.